The dusty border between the United States and Mexico seems a far cry from the forests of Canada and the eastern United States. But every fall, more than 100 million monarch butterflies leave their northern habitat and follow an ancient migratory path south across the U.S.-Mexico border on their way to 10 high mountaintops in central Mexico. How these butterflies, the great-grandchildren of those who left their Mexican winter home in the spring, find their way to these distinct peaks is a mystery. But what would happen to the species if that habitat were destroyed is understood, and the repercussions, like the butterfly's yearly voyage, would stretch from the desert to the mountaintop forests. Laura Lopez-Hoffman, an assistant professor at the University of Arizona's School of Natural Resources and the Environment, is one of many researchers who is looking at the issues, like that of the monarch butterfly, that spread across borders.
And so what I study is the ecology, some of these ecological connections that happen when countries share migratory species that move back and forth, when they share water that moves back and forth. And I also study the management and the policy challenges.
She works on a concept she calls ecosystem services, which refers to what environments have to offer those living in and around them.
Ecosystem services are the ways that ecosystems, functioning ecosystems, and the species that make them up support human well-being.
The environments that bordering countries share, she said, offer more than just hiking trails. They provide unique services including food, wood, vegetation that prevents soil erosion, crop pollination, and even something as simple as being able to enjoy a good view. What she finds particularly interesting about how the U.S. and Mexico share their environment is the question of how they share these ecosystem services. As an example, she points to the plight of the long-nosed bat, which pollinates the blue agave plants essential to the production of tequila in Mexico. The development of infrastructure and roadways in Texas, as well as cultural fears of vampire bats that have led ranchers to dynamite caves, have resulted in increasing degradation of the animal's habitat over the past 15 years. When an entire cave of bats summering in the U.S. is destroyed, the effects can be felt on crops south of the border. Beyond the secluded and specialized impacts, border management issues also affect that link common to all life: water.
The Colorado River Delta, which is at the southern end of the Colorado River, it's actually in Mexico, just across the border from the United States, now receives less than 0.1% of the water that it used to receive historically. And the delta over the last 100 years has shrunk to 10% of its original size.
Right now, the Colorado River Delta and the ecosystem it supports is relying on the wastewater that flows off the fields of the area's farmers. It is a delicate arrangement, clinging to a fine thread and threatened by an immense and seemingly unstoppable foe. Climate change currently offers the greatest challenge to conservation of transboundary systems.
So as climate change, continues, there's a lot of projections that there's going to be generally less snowpack in the Colorado River system, less water in the Colorado River. People are tightening their belts. So there's a lot of talk about increasing water use efficiency. Well, that sounds good, but it's actually could be bad for nature, because right now the delta is surviving on the inefficiencies in the system.
Finding a way to satisfy the water needs of both the U.S. and Mexico while preserving resources for environmental habitats has become a front-running conversation topic for Lopez-Hoffman and her colleagues.
It's going to be a huge management challenge to figure out how to cooperate and collaborate across the U.S.-Mexico border to develop kind of practices and programs that are adaptive to climate change, that protect species and also protect ecosystem functioning so that people in this region can keep enjoying ecosystem services.
When it comes to the border between the U.S. and Mexico, however, management challenges abound.
Sometimes we tend to think of it as scientists. We just provide better information to people, and we say to people how important the environment is, then things will get better. It's not that simple, because different peoples have different groups of people have different interests. There are constraints, economic, political, legal constraints to actions and policies and abilities to manage environments.
The U.S.'s battle against unregulated immigration has placed fences, roads, and other infrastructure in the paths of many species. Together with other faculty members and colleagues at the USGS, Lopez-Hoffman has been developing a monitoring protocol of impacts along the border. There are also programs in place to incentivize conservation, mechanisms she refers to as Payments for Ecosystem Services, or PES programs.
Interestingly enough, Mexico has been very innovative in terms of using the idea of payments for ecosystem services to incentivize stewardship, land stewardship, and conservation and protection of ecosystem services.
For several years, Mexico's Commission of Forestry has been paying landowners to guard their forests in order to protect downstream inhabitants from floods and poor water quality. There are also multinational treaties, such as the North American Free Trade Agreement, that attempt to aid the three countries in managing their shared environments, but these are often underfunded. NAFTA also looks no further than 100 miles in either direction from the border when assessing environmental impacts. For species like the monarch butterfly, this is nowhere near far enough. Lopez-Hoffman had to venture much further than 100 miles past the border to see the illegal deforestation that was destroying the monarch's mountaintop habitat, and the image has remained with her. Like the butterflies, its impact is one that can be seen far beyond the line in the desert sand.